Hello, this is What's Your Evidence, a podcast by Professor Chris White from Marshall University. And today, our guest is a former student of mine and a friend who is also a fellow former Marine. His name is Sebastian Morris. He also works at Marshall University too. And we've been talking over the years. He took a few classes from me. Uh, Back in the day when he was still at Marshall, he was working on his bachelor's degree and his master's degree, and we had some great conversations. And it occurred to me and Sebastian recently that it'd be good to have a discussion about our Marine experience, so we can hash out the complexities of it, the highs and the lows, and just for ourselves, but also occurred to us that it might be of interest to the general public too, especially for people who are thinking about joining the Marines. And again, this is, the major caveat here is that this is just both of our experiences, but what makes it interesting, and you can comment on this too, Sebastian, is that, we come from slightly different generations, but also I was active duty and you were a reservist. So that makes some differences. We had different jobs as well, but there were a lot of similarities too. So I wanted to first ask you, what's the best thing about becoming a Marine?
First of all, thanks for having me on. I love having these conversations with you. I feel like all the conversations we've had could have been podcast episodes, so it's cool to finally get to record.
Yeah.
But yeah, my favorite part about joining the Marine Corps, in hindsight, has been the brotherhood. When you first sit down with a Marine recruiter, they have those benefit tokens or whatever they call them, where they basically pull out like a briefcase with these little coins, and on each coin is written like a different benefit or something that you might find positive from joining. So they have one for adventure, financial stability, educational benefits, and then there was one for brotherhood. And I really didn't think much of it at the time when when I was joining, but that's definitely been the biggest takeaway for me. The friends I've made are going to be my friends for life. I mean, that I really seriously doubt I'll go the rest of my life and find better men to call friends, because I'm on the phone with them almost every day, just catching up and talking about life. And
Oh, that's great.
When you're in some of the worst times, that you complain about the most, or when you're in the field, essentially living off of bagged dehydrated food and doing whatever training they have planned for you. And you always have your friends to kind of make those moments way better, whether it's 10 degrees out and raining, or it's 120 degrees and hot as hell and you're thirsty. It's like that old saying, you can shovel shit all day as long as you're with your best friends. It doesn't matter
Definitely,
what.
that brotherhood part was not something that appealed to me either. I remember that he didn't use coins. He used there were like these little badges, almost like just generic looking kind of thing with words on them, things like integrity, discipline.
Same thing.
Yeah. And I didn't think about that. Main thing I was thinking about was, well, I want to be able to become something better than myself, join this kind of institution that will improve me and maybe give me a leg up. But the brotherhood part has been kind of one of these surprises. And in fact, I found it after the Marines more than when I was in. Just the other day when I was at the VA hospital, there was a guy who noticed my Marine tattoo, and we struck up a conversation, and for like 30 minutes or something like that. And he was a generation older than me, Vietnam War guy, and that kind of thing happens quite often, actually.
Yeah, I mean, once a Marine, always a Marine, and that's, I mean, you hear that, while you're in, you're like, okay, whatever. I can't wait to take this uniform off and never put it on again. But then it's like, on the other side now, I've only been out, I mean, less than a month, and I'm seriously missing that camaraderie, and I love bumping into other Marines um, out in town, or just people I know that were Marines, or are, I guess I should say are Marines. And even if I just see someone wearing like a olive green shirt with the Eagle Globe and Anchor on it, I say, hey, what's going on, Devil Dog? And they'd always put the smile on their face,
Yeah.
without doubt. I don't think I've ever had anyone react negatively when I kind of when basically a stranger is over enthusiastically says hi to them.
Right. Yeah, and of course, when you're young and you're about to join the Marines, then it's hard to imagine the longevity of that status, how it's going to go on for decades.
Right. While we're
Yeah.
on this topic of
Yeah.
reasons to join, like we're talking about these whatever benefit tokens and all the reasons, adventure, travel, discipline, integrity, all these sort of non-tangible things you take away from the Marine Corps. I think a lot of young men, I'm not going to speak for women, but I think a lot of young men join the Marine Corps because it is a war-fighting organization, and you maybe come from this background where that sounds very appealing, right? You come from, I don't know, like a regular suburban area. Even if you're from the country, it's not as exciting as fighting in a war. And then
Yeah.
that is really, I mean, sort of appealing to a young person. And I'm not a combat veteran. I've never been in a combat situation. I've never fired my weapon outside of a training environment. And I wonder what that is. The older I get, the more thankful I am that I don't have to deal with severe PTSD. I don't have to deal with thinking about lost brothers from combat, or potentially that anger that might come from those thoughts of like, what was this all for, basically. And I think a lot of young people joining, that I don't think that's ever going to change as long as humans are humans, unless we evolve and lose some of those maybe more aggressive or adventure-seeking traits. Uh, I think young people will always seek. So I won't say all young people. Obviously, there's a huge majority of our society that doesn't even want to lift weights or be physically fit, let alone go to
Yeah.
battle with another country or something. But there's definitely always going to be a population of people, I think, that sort of maybe see the benefit or the reality of having a force in readiness, right? It's like whether your population is 330 million or 25, you're always going to want a certain population of that tribe who's capable and willing and ready to, you know, conduct violence in the sake of, you know, defending your assets, or perhaps in times of, I don't know, when there's not so much, what's the word for that historically? Like, um, I know there's a historical term for it. When there's not, when it's not a time of plenty, right? You want a certain percentage of your population ready, trained, and ready to go and uh, take other people's stuff, basically, so your people can
Right.
survive on. I mean, whether you like it or
Yeah.
not, I think a huge part of our history that we don't like to talk about is that the world was built on a lot of violence, exploitation. I'm not obviously advocating for that sort of time again, but I think the Marine Corps people that join the Marine Corps and become Marines are definitely more tapped into that uh, sort of, I guess, ancestral. I don't even know. I'm not quoting any scientific research here, but it feels very. I think part of the reason that there is such a strong brotherhood there is because you all sort of have that same uh, you know, everyone feels like they're tapped into that same like understanding of what human beings are capable of, and you're there, you show up ready to do that, to be part of
Yeah,
that mission, to be part of that mission.
reminds me of the Billy Joel song. I don't know if you know it, Good Night Saigon.
Yes,
Pretty,
I've listened to it before.
yeah, and there's a line in there that he repeats several times, which is, and we would all go down together. And it's, they sing it like this chorus on the stage, these Vietnam veterans, when he does it, he's done it in public. Sometimes they do this, and you get this sense that, and we said we'd all go down together. We said we'd all go down together, meaning, we understand the implications of this. This is a life or death situation. Case of Vietnam, we have these examples like Vietnam and many other conflicts, some of which we don't know very much about in American history classes, but are certainly documented well, that are kind of really, we look back and historians point out how this was the wrong thing. Even without making a judgment call, it's hard to say that that type of war was justifiable in hindsight, especially. But then that doesn't have to be a reason for us to not have a martial spirit. And that's what I've been grappling with this ever since I left the military, is just the function of the military itself. And I'm becoming more and more aware now, especially since the Ukraine war, of the need to have a martial spirit in your society. But we can't be like ancient Sparta, where it's so warlike that we don't have any other attributes really, or enough attributes that could kind of carry forward. If you look at Sparta today, it's barely even a village, whereas Athens is a major metropolis, and it had that martial spirit, but it also had intellectualism, kind of the scholarly warrior. And I think that would be something good for us to cultivate in our society. We could learn a lot from not just Marines, but from the other services as well.
Definitely. That's something they actually do a really good job of preaching in the Marine Corps, is to be intelligent before you are basically to use your head. They say that all the time. All the way from a weekend Liberty brief before you go out and do something stupid with your friends to actual training environment. General Mattis said the best weapon on the battlefield is between your ears and your mind.
Yeah.
It's a thinking man's world, and if you're able to land, I had a really profound experience. This isn't going to sound profound. I'm not going to do a good job describing it, but I was at Seneca Rocks a couple weeks ago. When it was peak autumn, so the leaves were all red and yellow, and it was just it felt like a sea of, just the most beautiful leaves you've seen. And they're sitting kind of at the top of looking over everything. I was like, there was a time before technology and instant communication, when you had your tribe of people, right? And over the next hill, you knew there was another tribe of people that did not want good things for you or your people, like, to say the least. And so I think the art of conducting war is something we should never lose, right? As long as there are people on Earth, again, it's like you're always going to want that percentage of the population that's thinking about how to conduct war, thinking about those certain strategies. And again, like going back to what you said, there's definitely been wars we should not have been involved in. You could probably make an argument for the last, 80 years of war being maybe unnecessary or could have been conducted differently. But
yeah. Well,
yeah,
let's drill down on that part too, because something about the martial spirit is, how do you get people to kill when it's really against our nature to do that? Dave Grossman talks about that a lot. It's a different situation. Like if you have somebody who is psychopathic or sociopathic, that's, an actual mental condition. That's different than the person who is defending their family from an intruder. That person is very motivated to pull the trigger, and that happens quite often people are willing to kill in order to defend themselves and their family. But military is very different, especially when we're talking about the modern age. It's different than the description that you're talking about, which is really the more long term. Like most of our history has been dealing with people who are in that other holler or on the other side of the mountain range or other side of the river, in which case it's very imperative that people do have some kind of an ability to, I mean, they are literally looking at people who are very close to them and they are a threat to them, or they could be. Whereas in the modern age now, we're thousands of miles away from our enemies. Most Americans, in my experience, when I've been teaching, most people can't find the countries that we're supposed to hate and want to kill people in on a map. And so in that kind of a very odd situation, then to cultivate people who are willing to kill, it takes a kind of training that can have an effect. Even the training itself can have an effect on people. And I'll get more specific about that. I'm sure you could speak to this too. Just in boot camp, you know, the main response that we had was kill, either yes or no. But then when they would say things like attack the head, right? Everything was an attack, right? Attack the chow hall, right? And then move, and then that was the execution order. Move, and then we all respond with kill, and then we executed the move. And so what I'm wondering about is, how do we deal with something like that? I mean, do we really need to create people who are thinking in terms of kill, even when you're dealing with just a boot camp situation, as opposed to in warfare? Was it like that for you in boot camp too?
Oh yeah, I mean, boot camp is just a big cultural, insemination or whatever you want to call it. It's just getting everybody on the same page for 13 weeks. Like, this is our mission. This is what we do. So you get a whole bunch of classes on Marine Corps history, how to use your weapon, how to keep your uniform, your gear, and your body clean. So it's all very like, it's like it's like if you're trying to prepare people for the conduct of war in a very short period of time, you can't do a better job. I mean, the Marine Corps recruit training system, depot is just, I think, pretty flawless. I mean, you could debate whether you should spend more time doing this or that, and whatever. But I think, like you're saying, it is a good question whether we should still be preparing people for that sort of mindset. I mean, when I was in, it was certainly, like you're saying, you scream kill in response to everything. But yeah, I mean, you know what you're joining. You're joining a warfighting organization, and I think most people.
I just wonder if there's a more effective way of doing it. I don't know. I mean, because the problem is, of course, that you do need people who are willing to kill, and I've come around to that opinion after the Marines when I was in. I don't know if I entirely agreed. So I've kind of gone back and forth, but like the situation with Ukraine, if you don't have people who are willing to kill Russians, then you don't have an ability to defend yourself. But there's an effect on the mind of people who are trained to do that over and over again, and especially it raises the question: is there a more effective way? Like the Army doesn't emphasize that as much, and they don't yell as much either. Like the Green Beret training is incredibly intense, and yet it's much more kind of matter of fact. An instructor will say, this is what you have to do, and when you're expected to do it, you might have a day or two. It's very specific what you have to do: land navigation, whatever, any other kind of task, long marches to, oftentimes by yourself. And then they give you an evaluation at the end. Whereas in the Marines and the Navy SEALs, there's a lot of screaming and yelling, and they say that, well, this is about inculcating people, getting them prepared for the chaos of war. But I just wonder if that's really the best thing to do, because there might be alternatives.
Sure. No, I hear everything you're saying. I think it comes down to a very simple question, which is, what is the mission? Right. And so the mission of the Marine Corps Rifle Squad is to locate, close with, and destroy the enemy. Whereas I just Googled this. I don't know if this is even correct, but this is the mission of the Green Beret is geared towards 9 doctrinal missions: unconventional warfare, foreign internal defense, direct action, counterinsurgency, special reconnaissance, counterterrorism, information operations, that on and on and on, counter proliferation of weapons and mass destruction. And some of their deployments are a year or two long, so they're there for a long time. The Marines really don't deploy for longer than 6 to 9 months anywhere.
Yeah.
So I think the mission is very different. And so, like you're saying, they have very different training pipelines. You know, the Green Berets are obviously their training pipeline's way longer and more difficult than anything you do in the Marine Corps. And or I should say anything
Except
you
maybe
do
for MARSOC. Yeah, there's
anything you do to become a basically trained Marine. I'm not trying to shit on the
no, not at all.
recon forces or MARSOC guys.
And I don't even know the answer to the question. I think it's important to raise, if nothing else, because it speaks to the personality of the person who's joining. If the person, if maybe if I would have known that the Marines had that kind of, if I would have known more about that, maybe I would have considered maybe one of the other services. And I'm glad I joined the Marines, but I just feel like there's not very much understanding about the differences between the services. And I'm curious, did you ever entertain any of the other services?
Oh yeah, when I was in high school, me and my buddy were actually going to join together, and we were going to do like Army something. I don't even remember what it was going to be, but we were like, we just basically wanted to join something bigger than ourselves, challenge ourselves, come out on the other side tougher and better and more capable of going through life, and embracing its challenges, and obviously, defending the country. You're really full of testosterone and patriotism at 17. So,
but you were thinking about the Army first.
Yeah, we also talked about trying to be Navy SEALs and stuff too. Because I think when I was in let me Google this. Well, we grew up during Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. So I mean, it was in our face our whole childhood, and so I don't know if brainwash is the right word, but you're basically indoctrinated as an American to growing up through that, like those are the bad guys, and the war in Afghanistan and Iraq is justified. And so I don't want to turn this into a debate about that, but
yeah, sure.
But basically, especially coming out of high school, when your kind of options are a little limited in West Virginia, you're thinking, okay, well, I kind of like to just go, join the Marine Corps and actually do something with my life instead of go work at. I don't want to work at GoMart,
Sure. Were there certain movies that you saw when you were younger that might have influenced you to join the Marines?
Yeah, I was gonna say, American Sniper came out my junior year of high school, so that's what got me thinking about becoming a Navy SEAL, and ultimately decided against it just because there's a couple of reasons. Obviously, it's not the lifestyle I wanted. I liked the idea of being with a bigger team, and somehow I was just thinking about the movie American Sniper. I was like, it was just 4 guys on that mission.
Yeah.
Or excuse me, the Lone Survivor mission. So different story, different team,
sure.
different book. But I was thinking, I was like, that sounds pretty horrible. But the idea of being with an entire company or platoon of Marines sounded way better to me. I mean, it just appealed to me again, that brotherhood. And then Full Metal Jacket was a big influence for me.
Sure.
Joining the Marine Corps, I saw those guys, and
it's so common too to talk to Marines who, you ask them, well, what kind of images inspired you? And if you go back to the Vietnam generation, they all talk about John Wayne and the Sands of Iwo Jima. And then when you talk to people from the 80s and 90s, then they'll talk about Full Metal Jacket and maybe even A Few Good Men. And those, I had seen Few Good Men and I had seen Full Metal Jacket. Didn't really make as much of an impact on me as just Sniper, the first Sniper film with Tom Berenger, because that one, you don't see the spit and polish very much, but you see the possibility of one person with the spotter being able to control the battlefield or do something incredibly cool.
Yeah.
I mean, because that appeals to probably just one demographic out there, which is the young man who maybe hasn't done much in his life, and you look at that and you see him shoot from afar and stay concealed, and there's just a lot of interesting and motivating aspects to that. And I saw that, and it wasn't very long after that I went to the recruiter.
Yeah. You just hit on something there. It's I think there's a lot of, well, as human beings, philosophers have been writing about this for thousands of years, but you experience a lot of existential dread, right? Like, what is the purpose of my life? What am I doing? I haven't done anything with my life. And then I think the military calls to a lot of young people, especially like, this is a huge opportunity to potentially go and see the world. I know I've gotten to visit Japan, and half the states in this country in the lower 48 because of the Marine Corps, and it's all been training and stuff. But I wouldn't have had those experiences, without the military. So, kind of coming full circle to maybe your original question, which I think was, would I do it again? And I definitely would. I would recommend it to other people too. It's been life-changing in all the best ways. And I considered maybe taking just a few years off and going back in a different capacity, actually, depending on, where I'm at, physically. My back and knees or hips are not what they were when I first joined. So we'll see. But
right, because you just finished your enlistment, right?
That's correct. Yeah,
Weeks ago.
It's 6 years in the reserve. Yep, and that included a cool little. We joke about it. We call it a booze cruise sometimes.
Yeah,
it was a lot of hard training, but then on the weekends we'd just go out and get tore down and go out and run around town, have fun.
Yeah, right. There's a lot of that in the military, certainly. And so looking back, are you glad that you did the reserve route, or do you think that you should have done the active duty route instead?
Honestly, I wouldn't change anything if I could. I think I really like the life I have right now, and I also think it's just sort of a bad mindset to sit and think about. I wish I could go back and change things. It's only, I think, beneficial at this point for me to just sort of think about the future. And if I were going to taking that question moving forward, if I were to go back in, I don't think I would do reserve. I would definitely go active duty. Just having seen what I've seen and stuff. The reserve is a lot to juggle, because I'm working a full-time job. There's been times I had, a full-time job, school, and a part-time job. And then I had to go take a quarter of my month basically and go do something. The recruiter tells you it's a weekend, but it's really not. It's sometimes you're in the field for a whole week. And you were my professor. There was times I missed a whole week of class.
Yeah,
I don't remember if you remember that, but
well, I do remember though that you came to me one time and said you were going to be gone for at least 6 months, and that was probably pretty disruptive for your life.
Yeah, no, it was, and that's just sort of the nature of the military. And I honestly probably would stay in the reserve. I would have re-enlisted probably if we were doing more of that, but we're sort of entering a peacetime Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm.
If I mean, I hate that. I hate saying it like that because I don't want junior Marines to get the idea that they shouldn't be prepared and ready for war, because I mean something could happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
No one is expecting 9/11. But I mean, I don't have I have 14 more years till I hit the 20 mark, and um, something tells me we're in for a similar long haul of no deployments, no combat, similar to the 80s where we just got out of Vietnam, we just got out of Afghanistan. So there might be a pretty long period of time where there's lowered funding, fewer deployments, and I just don't really want to sit around doing field ops for the next 14 years. There's more to life. I mean, this year alone, I've missed. I mean, I don't even know how many family gatherings or job opportunities with my business, the video production company, just because I had to say no. We're going to the field, and of course, uh, this might not be everyone's mindset, but I've always put the military, first. Um, I felt like if I was going to do it, I should just do it and make it a priority, and just
And we should say too that in the time that you were in your reserve duty, you also got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, right?
That's correct. Yeah, that's one of the great benefits of the Marine Corps or military in general. I didn't use my GI Bill during my undergrad. I had some scholarships and I was working and stuff, but the with my master's, the GI Bill helped a little bit. But what actually helped the most was transferring uh, things I had done in the military over to civilian world. Um, there's something called a Joint Service Transcript, JST, that all service members, you probably still have access to it. You can transfer over like those courses they make you do into college credit. So that saved me a lot of time.
Yeah, people don't realize how much time people in the military spend literally sitting down, taking notes in a conventional classroom.
Yeah,
Right?
you do. You're in a classroom setting for most of your training. I mean,
Yeah. A lot of stuff's hands-on outside, but you got to go through. I mean, think about
yeah,
the whole first month of boot camp, right? That we were in class for, it's basically, from what I remember from boot camp, it was uh, cleaning your stuff, weapons and squad bay and your gear, whatever, sitting in
yeah.
classrooms, marching, PT, and
Hmm.
then eating, and you just repeat over and over again. It's like 5 different things that you would do pretty much every day. And classroom time seemed like it was at least a third of that time, 3 to 4 hours a day sometimes.
Hmm. Yeah, it's I think that's actually um become my favorite learning structure, is just the idea of a classroom time and then a practical application. I wish, K-12 public education had more of that.
Yeah, and I
Um,
wish K-12 also had the option like they did in the Marines, which they always said, if you're starting to get tired, just get up and stand in the back, right? Or drink
right,
some
yeah,
water,
yeah,
or your fellow recruit has the ability to smack you on the back of the head too. None
there
of
you go.
those things are allowed in a public school. They're just supposed to kind of gut it out for hours at a time.
Yeah, no, it's
Well,
there's a lot there
oh yeah.
that would transfer, I think, with good benefits.
I was wondering if there is any um, kind of advice that you would give to someone who's thinking about joining the military. Would you steer them into the Marines, or would you try and kind of tell them here are all the attributes of each of the services as I understand it? How would you approach that?
My advice would be pretty simple. It's the same advice you probably get from any staff NCO. Staffs aren't like, first aren't that might sit down and talk to you. Um, you know, save your money, don't drink and drive, don't get married to the first pretty girl that is nice to you. Uh, don't go buy a charger. I think some things you just kind of have to learn the hard way in life.
Yeah.
And so you can sit down and tell somebody all those things, but um, yeah, I mean, I think joining the military is a pretty good decision. And I think it presents a lot of opportunities to challenge yourself. The military is what you make of it. If you get out and you were just miserable the whole time, I mean, a lot of it has to do with your chain of command. A good command climate will completely change your experience in the military, but um, also just your outlook on life in general, your mindset. Like they're going to come to you with opportunities and courses and cool things, and you can go to them and say, I want more, can you please give me more? That's an option for you.
Hmm.
Just because you're in the military doesn't mean you're this drone that has to say yes sir, no sir. That's not what it's like, really. It's really you build really good relationships with your superiors, and you can go to them and say, hey, this isn't it for me. I want more. I want to change my job, or I want to change duty stations, or I want more out of the current job I have. Give me more responsibility. That's totally an option for you. Um, I mean, it's easy for me to say because I'm not in anymore, but
Yeah.
if you're miserable in the Marine Corps, it's sort of your fault. Um, and I believe that wholeheartedly. It's like you are completely in control of your experience. I mean, outside of being in a combat zone, right? And
Yeah.
there's an enemy and you have to be disciplined and do certain things. But when you're in garrison and just training and looking for, you might not get jump school or get the cool course you want, but you can certainly ask for more and get the most out of um, what you're wanting. And I'm sure there would be a lot of salty veterans that would disagree with me, but I think as in everything in life, especially the military, it's like it is what you make of it. It's your mindset. Because really, one day you're going to get out. Whether you do your one enlistment or you do 30 years, one day you get out, and that mindset will carry over into the rest of your life. Like if you're miserable in the military, you're going to get out, and you're going to realize it wasn't the military that was making you miserable. You might just be a miserable person with a miserable mindset and outlook on life. And it might be a good opportunity to do some self-reflection,
Yeah.
and say, what's going on? Do I need to change the way I'm looking at opportunities that are presented to me? Do I need to, uh, I don't know. There's a million things that
No,
could spiral
those
from
are
there,
all
but
those are all great points. I think you articulated it pretty well. And I think of the times that that I had low times in the Marines, and it was largely, barring, like if someone assaults you or something like that,
yeah,
um, for the most part, it was things that I kind of brought on myself, and I could have gutted it out. And that's one of the things that I noticed in the Marines more than anything else, even more so than in graduate school, is that there are going to be times when you can't you you have to keep going, and yet your brain tells you that you're ready to stop, and then you convince yourself to just keep going, and you find that it's possible. I mean, times in boot camp in particular where I remember I was using an e-tool. They were telling us to hammer with our e-tools to hammer in the stakes for our
hmm
tents real quick. And it was the first time I'd used one. They just kind of expected that we knew what we were doing. It was raining, and I didn't uh, fasten it as all the way down as well as I should have, and I ended up just clipping my fingers real bad. It got pinched in between one of the hinge parts,
oh
and
yeah,
blood just started coming out. It hurt so much, and then I looked around. And I said, okay, maybe I could just gut this out and not just pretend that I don't feel it. And I did. It was a mental gymnastics that I did, and in that moment I realized, okay, this is the kind of thing. I mean, people are getting shot in combat, and they have to
yeah,
keep going
yeah,
sometimes, and that's a possibility of the human spirit. So, same thing happens when you're doing jumping jacks for 30 minutes straight, and you've never done something like that before, and you know
hmm
that there's
yeah,
30 minutes of push-ups coming up, and then
yeah.
another 30 minutes of mountain climbers, and
There you
everybody
go.
else is doing it, and everybody
Yeah,
else is doing it, then you can too.
that's right.
That was a valuable lesson.
Yeah, there's sort of a toxic philosophy floating around modern Western culture that I sort of despise. And I I just think you should go out of your way to make yourself uncomfortable and challenge yourself every day, every week, every month. Seek new limits, and there's sort of a counter push to that, um, with how easy things have gotten, and
Yeah. If we don't do hard things deliberately, then it's hard to keep our instincts alive. You can lose them. We're born with
definitely,
the instincts to deal with discomfort. We're not supposed to live in central heating and air conditioning and all that. But who's going to deliberately say, I'm going to forego these comforts and just go outside and and endure the cold like right now and what's coming up this weekend? Um,
hmm
but you can find like Wim Hof. You ever heard of him
I
before? The
have, yeah,
Iceman? Yeah.
yeah,
He shows if you expose yourself to super cold temperatures every day, that your immune system could actually get a huge boost. And they've even challenged him by introducing viruses to his system and controlled experiments, and other people in the room get the same virus and they get sick and then he doesn't.
hmm
So there's a lot to that, that the like you said, Western culture is kind of getting relaxed, and that kind of swings back around to the beginning. When I asked the question about what the best part of being a Marine, a lot of us think about the benefit to myself. That's why we start, and that's what the commercials appeal to you, that you can get this out of it. But then once you get into this big system, which
hmm
is the military, you realize the importance of it if you're paying attention.
yeah, definitely. I think if you did it right, you left thinking about others more than yourself,
Yeah.
and that's just sort of like the best things in life, really, are like anytime you're at your happiest, it's usually because you're of who you're with, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's why the holidays are such an awesome time, or not awesome time for some people, because of who you have or who you don't have.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, it makes the suffering all that greater when you have people with you who you really care about.
I guess the only thing I didn't get to cover that I was planning on before
hmm
was the kind of considerations that someone should make when they're thinking about jobs. Did you think very much about that when you went in, or was it kind of did the recruiter steer you towards it?
No, I walked in there. So I actually talked to a couple of recruiters, Army, Navy. I actually talked to a Marine recruiter for a while before I made the final decision. But when I was ready to join, I walked in there and um, I said, don't even worry about giving me the whole spiel. I've heard it
Yeah.
before. I've already heard it before. Uh, I want to be a combat engineer, because I did some looking online and about what jobs were available, and that it was a blast. It was 6 years of construction, explosives, shooting rifles and machine guns, shooting rocket launchers. It was great. It was awesome. It was definitely the coolest job I'll probably ever have. Um, and I've actually looked into uh, some different job opportunities across the world for demining operations,
Hmm.
because that is sort of one of the biggest threats in certain third world countries, is that there were these uh, huge geopolitical conflicts. Maybe there wasn't even a war, but there was millions of mines in place on certain borders that now kind of prevent people from, you know, having any sort of stable agriculture or expanding properly. Uh, and so, I was like, that's perfect. I mean, we practiced demining operations all the time, and I I sort of I think my one thing, my I wouldn't call it a regret, but my sort of I would like to use what I learned at least once in life. And I'm not even talking about having to kill someone. I just mean, um, in a real world environment that
Yeah.
actually not just training, but like actually removing demolition that's blocking a road, or actually constructing something for people in another country that's going to improve their life, something like that. I don't know. Because it was like I compare it to like practicing for a basketball game and then never getting to play,
Yeah.
basically. Like practicing all the time, you're in really good shape. Your whole team is on a really good, healthy coordination and camaraderie. All the all the check boxes are checked and everything's aligned, and then you just never get to go actually do your job. So I mean, if I was recommending someone to pick a job, I mean, just definitely just pick something that sounds interesting to you. Because I mean, everything I just described probably sounds terrible to someone, and it might sound attractive to other people. So if you like using a video camera, they have jobs you can do that, and especially now where things are just getting better and better with technology all the time, you're actually going to get to do more and more of the things that you think you're going to do. Basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Makes
So just
sense.
don't be afraid. Just pick something that's exciting to you, or maybe scares you a little bit. Don't be afraid. Um, I think that's any advice for anything in life, but especially the military. Just um,
Yeah, and it seems like the other services actually might have more of those options. There's more jobs in the other services than in the Marines. The tech stuff is more in the Air Force, and I think, yeah, it does depend on the person's personality. That's something I think in the 90s, at least, a lot of the discussion, at least on the commercials, was, you'll get good job training. Good job training. That was what the Army and the Navy and the Air Force were selling people. But and I haven't seen a survey of this, a detailed survey of any kind, but my uh, just my assessment by talking to people who have been in is that I don't know anybody who does in the civilian world what they did when they were in the Marines. It doesn't really, or military in general even, doesn't really
mhm,
cross over very well. As a case in point, I knew a guy who was a corpsman for 12 years, worked in a hospital, and that's not really transferable to the civilian world. It's not the same kind of, you can't become a nurse afterwards. There's no equivalent that, that says, oh yeah, you can have 2 months of
right.
combat style medic training, and then you can do this in the civilian world. You still have to become an EMT. You still have to go through
Hmm.
the paramedics licensing course, nurses, doctors, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that's something they should definitely work on. Just improving those transition pieces. Those
Yeah.
programs do exist, but they are sort of difficult to truly qualify for. I actually have my Class A CDL because of the military. That was one transferable skill.
Oh, cool.
I learned how to drive trucks and stuff as like a side course. But there's a couple other things like that that will transfer. You can actually leave the military with a journeyman's license, I'm probably not using that term correctly, but you can certain trades in the engineering community do transfer very well to the
Hmm.
civilian world. You just have to be logging your hours correctly. So basically, someone above you from the beginning of your time in the Marine Corps has to be taking good care of you and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
this is the program. You enroll in it," and so it's like that's pretty rare for I hate to say it, but that's pretty rare for someone to know that that program exists and then also give a shit enough about their junior Marines to also enroll them in it.
Yeah.
Because most people are just thinking of one day at a time. They're not thinking past Friday night beers. And so truly the best leaders in the military or and in life too are but they're really looking for ways to serve their guys. And That's
Yeah, and you
actually
hit
kind
on
of
that
yeah.
word leader too. You hit on that word leader, which is so important. I think even
Yeah.
even if most of our skills aren't going to transfer over, with the exception of a few. I mean, pilots, that does
Mhm.
work. Those pilots hours, they matter, and a lot of airline pilots are actually former military. But in general, the best thing I think you can get out of it is the leadership skills, in a general sense, because everybody, at least speaking in the Marines, but I think the other services are the same way. You're encouraged to be a leader, even if you're at the bottom. They're saying,
right.
Look, you got to be observing everybody above you, and it is the most merit-based system I've ever been part of, where, in fact, things like nepotism and politics, they probably play a role somehow, but there's so much pressure to make sure that the job is being done correctly that it doesn't behoove anybody to move somebody up in the ranks to approve their promotion, if that person doesn't actually have the goods. So race and class and gender, all that kind of stuff is not, I would say, is not as important. It really is very merit-based system.
Yeah. And I think we should talk about that more on the next episode. I actually have to run.
Cool. Well, thanks for being with me today, Sebastian. And this is Chris White and Sebastian Morris discussing what it's like to be a Marine. And, he was in the reserves and I was in active duty. I was in the 90s. He was in just until recently. And, but some differences, but also a lot of parallels as well. So thanks again for being with us, Sebastian. We'll talk to you again sometime soon.
Sounds good. I'll talk to you soon, Dr. White.
Take care.